Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Empathy and AI, Transforming Higher Education Conversations with Intelligence. We're looking forward to an insightful session. Before we dive in, I'd like to introduce our hosts and mention some quick housekeeping notes. First up, we have Matt Baker, Associate Vice President at Mongoose. Matt's passion for innovation has driven his career across multiple industries, ultimately leading him to higher ed tech, where he spent the last 9 years shaping data, communication, and CRM solutions. Matt believes in the power of ethical AI and machine learning to transform accessibility in education and beyond. Joining him is Josie Sutcliffe, our Vice President of Marketing. Josie brings over 25 years of experience in tech marketing, leading growth and go-to-market strategies. She's driven success at companies like Bibliu, where she helped scale an edtech startup, and Vizier, a people analytics unicorn. Josie believes firmly in the power of human connection, and she's excited to share Mongoose's vision of empathy at scale. If you have any questions, please send them directly through the Q&A, and Josie and Matt will answer them at the end of the session. If you have any comments, feel free to use the general chat. We will be sharing the slides and the recording tomorrow. Thank you, and let's begin.
So we are excited to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and especially spending some time with my colleague, Matt, talking about this great topic. A quick intro to Mongoose for those of you that aren't familiar with us or maybe heard about us a few years ago and just haven't thought about us for a while. So Mongoose was founded with the mission to move people forward, and we do that by working exclusively with higher education institutions in North America. And we started about 10 years ago with a texting platform. It's the most implemented texting platform across higher ed. We send more messages for more institutions than anyone else. But over the years, we evolved that, adding in chat, adding in WhatsApp messaging and other analytics and tools. And more recently, we've evolved our platform into a conversation intelligence platform, which is really designed to help institutions communicate and have conversation with their constituents at scale. And you can see, the number of schools that we're working with and just the huge range, every different type of institution is using our platform. So that's a quick introduction. In terms of our agenda today, we're going to start by really giving you the 101 on conversation intelligence. So what that term means and how we think about it here at Mongoose. We're going to then go through some pitfalls and lessons learned and best practices that we've learned over the years and also what we've learned working with our customers, and then give you some specific stories from institutions like yours. And then finally, there'll be time at the end for Q&A, although as mentioned, please feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A panel anytime. So let's start first with this idea of what is conversation intelligence. So, sometimes it's really useful to actually pull out a dictionary and look at the two words, which is what we've done here. So this is Merriam-Webster. What is a conversation? Well, a conversation, and I think we all know this intuitively, is not a one direction broadcast. It's when two or more people engage in an exchange, a back and forth of ideas, thoughts, feelings, and so on. And it really involves that idea of sharing information, asking questions, having this more dynamic back and forth interactivity in the communications. And then when you think about what intelligence is what gives us the ability to learn new ideas and new concepts, to solve problems, to understand and comprehend things, to apply knowledge. And we do it from learning from experience and having training and so on. And obviously, in recent years, intelligence has evolved to be not just what we humans do cognitively, but also what technology like AI and generative AI can help us to do, which we're going to be talking more about today. So conversations happen across the entire student life cycle, right from when you're marketing and trying to recruit prospective students to your programs, to taking them through the admissions and enrollment processes, through understanding financial aid or making tuition payments or providing references or transcripts or other information, to helping them make the best decision for themselves. And then, of course, through the entire student experience at your campus, to driving student success and really helping to drive up completion rates and retain students and get as many as possible to the point of graduation. And then after graduation, looking at stewardship and alumni relations and how you help to advance and continue to have an impact on your former students, and also how they might contribute back to your institution after they've graduated. And when you think about this entire student life cycle, it's being supported by so many different technology systems, whether it's your CRMs, often multiple CRMs, your student information systems, spreadsheets, and so on. All of those technologies are in place and include some really valuable data that you can be taking advantage of. So Matt, do you want to take over from here?
Yeah, thank you, Josie. I've had the pleasure of working with higher ed for a while, and my wife is also, for those who may not have seen my little bio on Mongoose website, is a speech therapist, and so she is her day job is having conversations or helping individuals have conversations, and so from a child right in kindergarten, preschool, all the way up through being in college, being able to use their voice and communicate is so important. And so, but it's often something we can take for granted and not really necessarily think about. And as we look at communication tools, and I've built and managed, whether marketing tools or email tools or what have you, right? There's all these different ways to engage and communicate. But ultimately, what are we trying to have? And a lot of times, we're trying to have a conversation, try to have that bi-directional dialogue and exchange of information and understanding. And in the context of a college, it's not just in enrollment or not just in advancement or student success. It's every department on campus is often having conversations, especially with students. And so we had the opportunity recently to ask this question, which is often a question that most aren't really probably thinking about answering, which is how important are conversations with students? And we asked this some college presidents, and we're going to go through a few different of these quotes here. And one, it stands that goodness gracious, genuine conversations with students mean everything. And the next one, why? Well, because it's extremely important. It's why we exist. Ultimately, it is all about the students. And frankly, we do not talk to them enough. It's a really important concept of talking with them. And do we do it enough? And so how could we possibly know if we are or aren't? There is nothing more important than having conversations with students. All right. And then we go down to the next one here. How students experience us is what we really are. And I find this one an interesting concept because experience us in conversation is where, that college president went. Because ultimately that conversation, that exchange of information and perception is ultimately kind of the basis, right, of that experience on campus, whether it's with faculty, whether it's with offices, et cetera. Having that relationship is what defines the experience, and then ultimately becomes who the school is, since it's made up of the people and the students. So the question is, well, are they right? Are these college presidents, is their intuition on being asked a question that they rarely have to think about or answer specifically, does data back that up? And so we've done some different research and studies on things, and wanted to share with you a little tidbit of something I think will resonate with a lot of folks here. And so we took a look across a bunch of different students, about 300,000 students in this sample here across the past few years, across a variety of different school types. And it broke this into really three main groups. And those are students who weren't messaged at all. We were really focusing especially on text messaging in particular. I can get into why that's such a phenomenal channel, especially today. And then those who really only received text messages and reminders and notifications. So those who didn't at all, those who just received really kind of one-dimensional, one-directional notifications. And then those who actually were engaged in distinct conversations. And we looked at really every outcome across the board, but one that we're going to highlight here right now is enrollment yield. And you can see on the right-hand side that as the number of conversations went up, the outcomes, the percentage, right, of yield just went through the roof, all the way up to the plus 90% as you had more than 20 conversations. And I think that bears with, kind of common sense to a certain degree. Well, of course, right? As students have more conversations with us, they're able to answer the questions they may have. They're able to maybe even express some frustration or emotions. But better question is, how could we possibly know that might be happening? And so conversations, clearly drove higher outcomes across all team types and types of outcomes surveyed. But one of the bigger things was across those college presidents is really none of them could answer, well, how many conversations are you having? And so I think we're going to take a little break here and do a little quick poll about your communication patterns. Totally.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think a poll will be launching if it hasn't already. I can't see it yet. So, but maybe I won't see it as a presenter. So hopefully that's launched. And we're asking you, how do you communicate with students today? And you should be able to select everything that applies. So if it's by email, phone, in person, messaging, which can include text and WhatsApp, there's the poll. So go ahead and make your answers. Also, web chat if you have a chat bot on your website, or direct messaging, thinking about social media. So if you're direct messaging through, Instagram or something like that. So as soon as we have a decent number of responses, we will see the results. Just if the person doing the poll can just switch to the results as soon as they see a good number. We'll give you one more moment. Oh, can I see a bunch of stuff in chat? So I'll just double check. All right. And let's see, here are the poll results. So hopefully you can all see this. So not surprisingly, 96% sent email. Um, Next was in person, then phone, about 50%, messaging, about 41% of you are doing that in some form, and then less with web chat and less with direct messaging. So thanks for sharing that. So what we looked at is, okay, how are students actually wanting to communicate today? Where are they spending their time? And this is a report that was put out specifically on Gen Z, looking at the weekly average screen time. And you can see here that although everyone communicates with email, I mean, it's an institution campus-wide mandate, and I would think it's mandatory. You're always going to have email. Email apps are not where students are spending their time. Not surprisingly, TikTok's at the top of the list, but you can see in number 3 is messaging. So that would include text and WhatsApp, for example. So, when you think about Gen Z, how institutions are connecting with students and engaging them has really been needing to change over the past few years. The other interesting data point is that research has found that Gen Z is actually more comfortable communicating digitally. So when asked, Gen Z, 70% actually say they prefer digital communications to non-digital. And what I find really interesting is that Gen Z are actually more likely to share their feelings and their emotions digitally than if they were on the phone with you or if they were in person with you. Um, and, I have my own thoughts. Maybe this is because there's a sense of psychological safety to be handling things on a screen. But in any case, you can actually engage in really meaningful conversations if you know how to do it through things like messaging. And we're going to actually share some examples of that down in a few slides from now. So, something that we've learned over the years of working with, all the institutions that we do is that engaging students in conversation is hard. It's tough out there. And getting insights into the conversations you're having with students across the life cycle, across the campus, is possibly even harder. And the reasons you see on the slide, traditional outreach really doesn't work anymore. So you're not going to engage students just by sending emails, for example. There's an enrollment cliff happening, but why enrollment might be decreasing or increasing at a different college, it's hard to get insights into why that's actually occurring. And it's really difficult to actually get insights at scale into what's on the minds of students and things you could do or say to better engage them. And so those are some of the topics we're going to be continuing to talk about through this webinar. And we have another poll we're going to pop up now. And I think we will see it in a moment. So we're going to be asking you, there's the poll. We're going to be asking you, how do you measure digital conversations with students or others? So your other constituents might be, alumni, parents, and so on. So if you don't measure this, just check that. And then if you are measuring this, just pick the different options, right? So we know how many messages we send. We have engagement metrics like open and click rates. We have reply rates. We can actually connect our message engagement to our enrollment outcomes or our retention outcomes. Or, hey, we actually have sentiment and emotional analytics. We know how people are feeling based on the messages that we're sending back and forth with them. So let's see the results. We'll assume everybody's had enough time to go in and answer them. All right, here it comes. All right, so 60% don't mention that or don't measure this. And that's not surprising because a lot of the technology that's in place, it's not easy to measure this with that technology. In fact, the more technology you have, and often institutions have a very diverse tech stack across different departments and so on, it makes it harder and harder in many cases. And then you have some that have, perhaps you'd call more tactical metrics like volume, how many we send, what the engagement rate is with them. No one has identified that they have sentiment and emotion analytics. Again, not surprising. This is a new area that really generative AI has made available. And it is great to see that 15% of you can connect your message engagement to outcomes. All right, back to Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Josie. That was great. I love to see those results from the poll. There's that many folks that are interested in tracking these different things, and maybe there's a lot of opportunity for you. Also, happy you're here. You're in the right place. So when we look at intelligence, earlier we're defining, well, what are conversations? What is intelligence? And obviously, we're talking about that in this context. And it's about analytics, not just metrics. And when in terms of teasing out what do those different definitions mean, metrics tend to be very descriptive, kind of talking about, hey, what's happened? What does that look like? So traditionally, some of the points that we just saw in the poll, right? How many messages were sent, or maybe what were some of those different response rates, or the negative of that, like an opt-out rate, right? But on the analytics side, there's a lot generally trying to understand it and trying to explore, well, what's maybe some of the causation, or the factors that might be driving some of the behavior that we want to see. How do we understand that better so we can do more of it, or we can solve some of the things that may be causing some resistance or obstacles to the behavior we're looking for. So for instance, as we look at really that sentiment and emotions, ultimately what we can understand there is, why would somebody have conversations with you, or why wouldn't they? If we can measure now conversations instead of not just messages back and forth, but that bidirectional exchange of information, and how successful was that conversation, and what were the emotions and the topics that conversation was discussing at scale across your organization. Every office on campus has access to that information. Suddenly we can really start to explore, okay, well, are conversations happening? Are people coming back and having multiple ones? Or are they only having one? Or are they not even having a conversation? And we can start to understand the why behind it, because we know so much more about the conversations themselves, that we can start putting those pieces together on behavior. Are they not having enough conversations because resolution isn't happening? Are they not having enough conversations because we're not talking about the right topics, or emotionally they're having a really hard time and are more frustrated? Or the inverse. Are we having a lot of really successful conversations because we're doing all of these things really well and are able to be successful, and we feel confident that we're doing the right things? So ultimately, within the context of a conversation intelligence platform, it's obviously a tool that brings all that together. And so it's not really just about conversations, and it's not just about intelligence and understanding conversations that go on. It's about both of those things in tandem, in concert, being able to have conversations and have the right ones, and know and have confidence that you're in fact doing that with the staff and the efficiency and all the different, realities that you have to, that you're faced with. Not everybody has all the time, right? Every day just to sit down and have conversations, right? So how can you, work smarter, but also make sure that you can prioritize, having these conversations with students? Because we saw earlier, having those individual conversations with students is what drives the outcome essentially faster than almost anything else, because it's within the context of each of those individual conversations with that one-on-one person that you're able to solve their problems, build that individual rapport, and drive that outcome further, whether it's an enrollment outcome, or it's a student success retention outcome, all the way housing, or alumni and advancement. So ultimately, it helps teams improve their results through having better conversations, and be able to focus on the conversation as the ultimate kind of task that they can focus on, rather than just, are we having messages and kind of hoping for the best, having more confidence and visibility. So on the right is kind of a sample of what a dashboard could look like within our tool. That's talking about conversation intelligence in action. So how can you understand when you come in, how are people feeling? I've had some conversations. Maybe I have a small team here. Over the last few days, we've had 427 conversations. How are those folks feeling? What are the emotions that they're expressing? Were those conversations resolved or not? And all of this data requires no extra effort from the part of the staff, right? They're still just doing the normal things they would be doing and having conversations, sending messages out, seeing messages come in and responding to those, being empathetic. And the platform can provide this lens, right? As all of that is happening to say, hey, how is that going? As that being successful, what are the topics that you're talking about? Are they coming back, right? At that middle chart, are they coming back and having those repeat conversations with you? Because you know that ultimately what's going to raise your outcomes the most quickly. And then over time, over the course of the year, are you able to build up those conversations? So what does that look like? Is that just in one area? No. And this is what's so beautiful about this is as you saw from the college presidents, they said, well, conversations really are what the whole campus is. This isn't just an enrollment thing. We've talked a lot about enrollment examples, and that tends to be what gets a lot of focus. But it's the entire campus. It's student success, it's advancement, it's every little office and department in between. And what it allows you to do is this little example screenshots here, right? Shows that, hey, from one area to the next, you're going to see different, obviously topic breakdown, right? But you might even see different, if you look at the sentiment at the bottom in the admissions space, you might see a lot more positivity, right? Students are really excited to come to the school. We're going to be super, super polite. And then you get into the student success current students, there might be a little bit more of a neutral sentiment going on, maybe a little bit more of a frustration. And you get to the advancement side, well, they're just getting asked for money. Oftentimes the types of conversations you're having are going to be a little bit more neutral in general, right? But you can still focus on overall result and kind of baseline it against your past performance and understand what excellence looks like in each of those individual contexts. So it's not a one size fits all. So it's really campus-wide conversation intelligence lifts outcomes across every department. And taking that into kind of some really practical things. What can I do today, right? What is something, if I don't have a conversation intelligence platform, in my hand right now, well, help me understand what that might look like if I did, or what would be some of those lessons that I might even be able to apply, in the interim. So we're going to look through some examples. Now, these are inspired by real conversations. These are not, the identities have been protected. These are not real data. We're not going to share anything obviously like that, but the thematic information and the kind of, the do's and the don'ts are inspired by real topics, real things that people are asking and talking about. And so we're going to explore some of that together. And the very first one, and this is almost the easiest, but the easiest one to miss sometimes is one-way communication instead of dialogue. Are you just telling or are you asking? And if you just a couple times here, so avoid pushing information without creating opportunities for engagement, and instead enable the two-way responsive conversations to invite student, alumni, parent, you name it, interaction. Because you're leaving an opportunity. If all you're doing is letting people know about something, we'll talk about this a little bit later. There's a time and a place, but that's what you're relying on and hoping that letting FYIs are going to drive results. You're often losing some opportunity. We're going to look at an example of that. And on the right-hand side, we're going to see this series of kind of some text. So, hi, Matt. Our open house kicks off. And then there's another one, right? I didn't respond to that one. So October comes around. Hey, Matt, there's another one, right? We hope to see you there. We hope to see you there. Very standard, very common. If you look at your, individual student communication flows, you might see some similar patterns to this. Student responds, there's no response back, right? This is not really a monitored inbox. It's not really asking to see a question. It's not creating any sort of a need. On the right-hand side, this is one of our most successful components. We have a feature within our platform called Smart Messages, but anybody can do this. And Smart Messages in this approach, it triples response rates, right, and conversation rates. It asking not just, hey, there's an open house, but I'm taking the opportunity to advertise what's going to be there that I think is the most exciting for students. And it's going to drive them to respond. Hey, what's exciting you about this? A, B, or C, or D, right? And they're responding C. Now I know that, and I can see collectively across this whole group of students, how many people are interested. So if there's a lot of folks looking for an AI lab walkthrough, and I've only got 3 slots and I've got 500 people responding saying they're excited about it, then one, I know they're more likely to show up on campus because they never responded saying they want to come. So they're going to they get a flat tire, they're getting there. But two, I get a little bit more information. So maybe I need to add some more time slot to this. But regardless, I've got more information I'm interested in. Now I can start a conversation. They're going to come back. In this case, wow, that was really awesome. I went on that tour and I'm now going to have a conversation about it. That really existed. Like I'm now building up my perspective on what this campus means, and the opportunities here for me at the institution. So invite interactions. Josie.
Yeah. So on to the second. So one of the pitfalls that we've observed is when you treat all students like they're the same student instead of personalizing that outreach. And to be fair, sometimes you end up treating all students like they're the same student because that's what your technology allows you to do. But really, in order to engage students in conversations and improve your outcomes and results, you want to avoid that kind of generic one size fits all, almost vanilla messaging that doesn't consider individual needs or their preferences and typically isn't very empathetic as a result. So, instead you can use tools, including AI, and we're going to be diving more into this, to personalize that outreach based on the individual, the conversations you've had with them in the past, other information you have about them, and really use that to drive these deeper connections, more empathetic and human sounding conversations. So here's an example. So on the left, I've been trying to apply for housing for a while now. I've even tried updating my info. Do you have any suggestions? It's not very easy. So you get the more generic response. As mentioned, we'll be sending out invites soon. Then you can access the portal. That's what I've been trying to do. And to be fair, this response probably didn't know what they had said in the previous. Sorry, you need to wait for the invite. Instead, using AI and personalization at scale, you can give a more personalized response and you can acknowledge their feelings. That's frustrating. That must be frustrating for you. I think you're just waiting for the link, but you can also call this number. So a much more helpful, personalized response. And here's another. So that was sort of more of an enrollment example. So this is an example that's more related to advancement or alumni relations. So reaching out to an alum and saying, hey, can you send can I send you information on how you can make that year-end gift? And they give you a negative. Okay, no worries. We're done here. Instead, again, using AI insights, automated message generation, best practices and all of that, you could respond, oh, thanks for letting us know. Out of curiosity, what makes MU here is Mongoose University, the fictional university. What makes it us special to you? We try our best to update you with things you love most. And you get a response. And you can imagine this continues on. And what's been really amazing is talking specifically to customers that use us for alumni relations is hearing how they really engage with that audience and the sort of warmth in the responses they get back. All right, so just a few more best practices diving deeper on this. When you think about who you're sending your messages to, you obviously want to be thinking of them as individuals, customizing your responses and the information you're providing and really engaging them on their terms. So acknowledging their feelings, understanding the specific issue or topic that they're interested in. A key part of this is also thinking about your opt-in strategies. So, how, when you're depending on the type of messaging you're sending and conversations you're trying to have, think about whether you're having students opt into those and how. And then, of course, be human, even when you're using AI to help generate content or give you guidance on messages to send. There are lots of opportunities for communicating and creating conversations with students. And Matt mentioned earlier that there can be a time and place for a one-way broadcast message. Sometimes there's a notification you need to send, and you don't actually need a response or a conversation to happen. But when you look through this list, which is really mostly related to enrollment examples, these are times where actually it's an opportunity to engage that student in a conversation and get a better result or outcome, So whether it's supporting them with early admission, helping them fill out their application correctly, making sure that deposit happens on time. If it's not happening on time, finding out why and maybe giving them some guidance to help them get to that point, and so on. And then finally, here are some little etiquette rules. So when you're messaging a student, they want to know that you're a human who has an identity. And so they should know yourself, and they should know who you are. And something that we found is that students really do associate different phone numbers when you're texting with different functions and people at their institutions. So, having a specific phone number, which is for your enrollment counselor, they're going to reach out to that phone number in the future if they have questions related to enrollment. You want to address them directly as humans. You make sure you're using the right tone, be concise in your messages. Think about what's the call to action with my message that I can get them to respond to. And then, of course, have that energy and help them feel your enthusiasm for whatever might be going on. And then be ready to respond. I mean, one of the challenges with institutions is when someone responds to your message and gets ghosted unintentionally by you because it's maybe going into the CRM and the individuals who are responsible for monitoring those messages don't actually even know they've gotten a response. So just something to be aware of.
So number 3 on the list is similar as we move off this is ignoring instead of responding to emotional cues in student interaction. And really what we want to try to avoid is failing to identify and escalate frustration or confusion in responses. And that can be hard to do. And so obviously there's a couple of elements there of like, well, do people always have time when they're communicating with students? Do they even have a good channel, right, in which to be able to escalate that, hey, this is going on, right? And so if you don't have a lot of time to read and absorb, what someone's saying, it may be hard to know when to escalate. But also, hey, where's it necessarily going to go? Who's going to see that? Who's going to help intervene and assist with the situation? So instead, if you have the power, I know nobody in the poll currently is able to do this, but we're going to explore an example of this here in a second of what that actually looks like. Of sentiment and emotion analysis can flag and help you identify through conversations, normal conversations. This isn't just, hey, let's go out and try to ask some leading questions of students to see what they respond, and then flag, those students who might seem like they've provided some sort of a response that, seems abnormal or something. This is the normal conversations that your staff are already engaging with. How can you, through the course of that, be able to detect where something is going on? Doesn't mean you still can't ask those kinds of questions here and there, but there's a lot of other conversations that happen when people are getting frustrated in just the day-to-day and normal, and it will provide you with situations that they need help with. And you can easily identify those with the right kind of tool. So we're going to look at an example here. And again, say this is based on real events. And on the left, this is a very reasonable thing, right? Very normal. Hey, this is Mongoose University. We're reminding you to do this, right? To make sure you sign up for you create your academic plan, right? Your fall plan. And this, student responds back. It says, hey, I'm probably going to have to drop out because I'm pregnant and I'm at the hospital a lot. And so I've really, my focus is completely depleted. And the response back was really, well, okay, if you want to drop out, it's really kind of past, because they're not even talking about the academic plan. They're talking about the current term now, right? And there's using the opportunity of this reminder to check in and say, hey guys, guess what? I'm not even looking at next semester. I'm actually think this semester I need to withdraw. And the response was not exactly the most empathetic, right? The question would be, how would you know in your current platform that the conversation on the left happened? And that maybe an advisor or supervisor might need to step in and intervene. Or if the individual responding knew that a supervisor might see the conversation and intervene, how might they respond in otherwise? And if they had a tool like be able to use an empathetic AI assistant that was trained on what was going on, could they, with the same amount of time and energy, create a response that's actually much more empathetic and engaging rather than just kind of doing what has to happen, which is, well, if you want to drop out, that's fine, but we need this information. And so on the right-hand side, you can see that as the messages come in, the conversation is understood. We can flag that and understand this sentiment. Is this a positive, negative sentiment, frustrated, appreciative, neutral? And what's the emotion? So like an emotion in this case might be distress, right? From that student expressing kind of this angst about their current situation and might need to be dropped out. Whereas then the response back, obviously you can see on the lower right, thank you for sharing. Your well-being is a priority. I'll help you with the withdrawal process. It's okay to step back. Can I share your number with our counseling services team too? Because obviously this is about holistic with that person, right? And the conversation isn't just going to end here and hey, let's let you withdraw and that's it, right? Ultimately, I think everyone that's in higher ed understands that there's so many opportunities to help move students forward. And maybe that's it in their degree right now, or maybe that's taking a bit of a break and be able to go and take care of their lives and then come back at a later point in time. And helping them support them through that whole journey and all of its different turns in life is really important. It starts with conversations like this and the ability to identify these things at scale and know, hey, when do I need to step in and be able to be empathetic or learn from cases maybe where we didn't do it well and be able to go find those. Where are those examples that maybe we missed the mark? We can learn from it and train our staff on what to look for and how to respond better. So the next time they know that that's the expectation.
All right. So another thing to avoid is measuring your success with vanity metrics instead of thinking of it in terms of strategic metrics and analytics. And I'm in marketing, so I know all about vanity metrics. I have to admit I've used them myself from time to time. But let me explain a little bit more what I mean here. So focusing only on things like your open and click rates and how many messages you're sending, rather than focusing on engagement and really understanding what's going on. It might be informative, but it's not insightful. So again, it could be interesting, but you're not necessarily going to figure out, okay, well, what next based on that? Like, what do I do if my click rate is lower than it was previously? I'll have to figure out some solution. But what you want to do instead is really think about tracking deeper conversation metrics and analytics. So to dive a little deeper into this, when you think about the tactical metrics or insights, these are the ones that are like your click rates, your volume sends, your reply rates, how many people attended your event, and that sort of thing. These are really good for short-term immediate actions and maybe addressing things related to operational efficiency. But if you only focus on this area, you're not really going to get to the heart of how to make things better and how what you're doing aligns with the greater strategic institutional mission and goals. So when you think instead about, okay, well, what's a strategic metric or a strategic insight? These are things that focus on those longer term goals, things like overall performance of your team or your functional area, and then really how it fits within the overarching institutional objectives, mission and vision and purpose. And some examples here are the things like conversation sentiment and emotions. So, for example, being able to look at what is the sentiment this past month with the messages that we've been sending related to enrollment? Are people feeling joy? Are they feeling anger and frustration? Are they neutral? What are the topics that are being discussed related to those topics? Why are we seeing response rates or conclusion rates with some and not others? And really digging into the relationship that exists between the conversations that you're having with those metrics that are related to the success outcomes of your department and of the institution, like enrollment growth or yield rates, retention and graduation rates, and so on. So, really thinking about, okay, today, and I think from that earlier poll, we saw that today, most are focusing on the more tactical metrics, probably because this is what you can get more easily through the systems that you're using. But really the goal should be to shift and add in these strategic insights, which are the kind of things that can be delivered by conversation intelligence.
And going back to kind of those different types of messages, we know that, hey, you only have so much time, and there's often a lot of messages that need to get sent out. And we all know that higher ed, especially enrollment in higher ed, and even sometimes in getting through the graduation process, isn't always the simplest. And there's often a lot of, notifications and FYIs, and you have a limited staff and, can't be sitting around manually doing things. So we want to use tools, right, to scale and work efficiently. But the danger with that is kind of expecting the results of a conversation from a notification message, or only sending out and messages that are effectively robotic and transactional. So how do you balance the two, right? How can you have personalization when it matters, and invite those responses, for when you're actually going to have humans responding and able to engage with students on a one-to-one level, but yet still be able to utilize the tools to do the things like FY, hey, remember the deadline has been extended, those kind of things that aren't necessarily even requiring conversations. But you want to make sure people get the information, right? Proactively can understand things that are going to be important to them. And so as we kind of compare those two main kind of types, we've got the notification and reminder broadcasts. These would be kind of like the traditional, you would think that, hey, my CRM is probably what I do the most in my CRM. Like if I have a current email or text or things like that, it's, hey, FYI, remember these things are happening. I've got maybe a drip campaign set up, and maybe I have automated triggers based on, some sort of set of logic around an application or documents or, alumni, et cetera. Whereas on the two-way messaging, you're wanting to have a conversation. You're sending out messages and you're making sure that there's space all the time on the part of staff to actually engage in that conversation on the way back. So those are the goal. You want to FYI, or you want to engage in a conversation. So when do you use each? Well, really on the broadcast, it's a bunch of these. Hey, it's short time notice. Here's what you need to know about this, FYI. On the right-hand side, you just see on the two-way conversations, it gets a lot deeper, right? We're trying to have support and advising and counseling and check-ins and to connect with you when it comes to alumni to build relationships. Completely different type of an investment on the part of the team, but have very, very much different ROI ultimately. And so if we look at the best practices, well, the best thing to do with your broadcast or reminder, notification or reminder broadcast is just not to avoid ghosting folks by accident. So if you send out a text message, but you're not really monitoring their inbox for responses, make sure you're proactive in letting folks know that when you send it out, right? Say, hey, this is an FYI and not this, so this is an unmonitored inbox, right? But there's ways to communicate to students that you aren't, not to expect a response from you. And on the flip side, to use numbers and not mix and match those things together. So make sure that they're using, in the case of text messaging, phone numbers that when they are two-way dialogue, you're using those same phone numbers for two-way dialogue. And you're not also using the same number for kind of those notification reminder broadcast FYIs. Because if people feel like they're getting that kind of a message within what seems like a personal channel, it may cause them to be less engaged in that personal channel. And that obviously undermines its long-term efficacy. And so kind of circling all the way back to where we started, just a reminder again of like, well, why are they different? Why is it important between the two? It's because ultimately we know you want to message folks, because those who didn't get any message really in this case with enrollment yield, but whether it's enrollment yield or open house attendance or FAFSA or donations, whatever it is, whatever the outcome is, it follows the same kind of curve, right? There's no engagement. Obviously that's not great. If there's some notifications and text reminders, they've opted in for that sort of thing, it goes up. But the absolute best and the ideal is to get those students then to engage directly with your staff and your teams in conversations to have that directional, low friction exchange of information and answer their questions. And ultimately, when we look at, hey, AI and how is that going to work? And we know the complicated loaded thing today, there's really kind of two main elements from the AI. And there's the AI as the tool that helps you in the conversation, having them. And then there's the AI that we've assembled that helps you understand the conversations from the outside, looking across all of them. And I think it's important to understand that those two things, you can use both in concert. I think there's a question actually that had come in that was related to one of those, kind of the first of how AI is actually involved in conversations directly. But then ultimately, you want to make sure above it that you can see across the board, both the AI and the humans are still empathetic and engaging. You can have that confidence and visibility, because ultimately, that second bullet point, focus on thoughtful human AI collaboration to create transformative student conversations. In my opinion, students are coming to schools to get answers, right? To get answers, to grow their worldview, right? To move their careers forward. And sometimes that starts in the smallest ways. And the offices that they're talking to, the housing office or the enrollment office or the registrar's office, if they're able to go into those little answers to those little questions, right, along the way and along that journey, they start to get that understanding of that brand with their institution. that you do move them forward. You do help them learn. You do help them advance. And with AI helping, one, expedite some of those conversations, and two, help your organization know that you're having them at scale and you're doing it successfully and you're able to have it empathetically and whatnot. But you can then identify where you can improve. It only increases your ability to set that ground with students earlier in the process and helps them all connect with you going forward.
Right. Yeah, and those transformative student experiences is why we all work at Mongoose. So, just some stories from your peers. I talked about it at the very beginning about the student journey and how conversations and conversation intelligence as a result happens and has value across the entire student journey. So here are just a few examples. So when you think about students that you're perhaps trying to recruit to apply at your college or university, they're going to hit your website and start to look for answers to their questions. Or if they're an existing student, they might also do that. When you have a chat bot on your website that can use intelligence and AI to automatically answer 80% of routine inquiries, which was the result of one of our customers that you're actually going to see a bit more about on the next slide, that can have a huge impact. Students are often looking for information outside of office hours. And so this is a really great place where you can leverage technology to enable those conversations to happen in an automated way and achieve, such a level of automation where people are happily receiving the information they need for most of their inquiries, that you can take that weight off of your staff and let your staff focus on the more high value activities. Enrollment, we've talked a lot about, one of the results here was with McLennan Community College, when they implemented Mongoose and using messaging across their enrollment process, the more conversations they were able to engage students and the more enrollment increased. And they saw, an almost 9% increase in 1 year, really by engaging students and using tools to really help shape the type of conversations that counselors were having with prospective students, addressing their questions in a way that was informative as well as empathetic. Then moving into advancement. So, what happens when people leave the university or college and you want to reach out to them and really help to keep that connection going and support giving days. That's a really great opportunity as well to leverage conversation intelligence. And you see this one example was a 300% increase in giving day donations, really because of campaigns that they were running using intelligent conversation capabilities. And this ties directly to stewardship as well. So, I had a conversation with one of our customers and they were telling us how they're using these very personalized messages with alums to really drive up stewardship. So much so that alums would engage in ongoing conversations with the people that were messaging them. This was driving an increase in the events they were putting on or activities. One was doing a trip to Italy and they, sold out their slots pretty much overnight because they were able to have this very meaningful back and forth relationship, all digitally with, a high number of their alums. And then finally, just student success. One of our customers shared about how when they get students to opt into messaging, so to opt into having these digital conversations with them, they retain 98% of those students and see them successfully complete their degrees. So pretty amazing outcome. So to dive a little deeper into McLennan, the McLennan is such a great example because they've really taken this concept of conversations and adopted it campus-wide. They have over 28 teams using conversations through text and chat and so on to really engage with students across the whole journey. And, they've increased their engagement for first generation students specifically, They've used it to really drive success coaching and support advisement. And they also have an amazing one-stop shop for all their enrollment services that's supported by this kind of digital communications. And they've seen this incredible improved efficiency and effectiveness, not only in being able to automate a lot of the messages using AI and so on, but also to really help their teams know what to say and how to say it by using, generative AI tools as well as best practices and playbooks. And then, of course, that critical importance of integrating with their CRMs and their student information systems and having a platform that that staff can learn, within an hour or two of using it has been really an important part of their success.
This is one of my favorite overall topics. Not just the slide's kind of cool, but when it comes to where we stand today, and we go back to that one of the initial polls of what are folks looking at, and there's kind of a zero on that sentiment and emotion. Today with conversation intelligence, the technology that we've seen over the last couple of years, especially on the evolution of AI, has really opened the door to understanding conversations in a completely new way. And you have all of these messages. I call it, you have this messy messaging data, just words and text messages and emails and things all scattered all over the place. And there's really nothing in most individual tools that help paint that picture. Say, well, what are the actual conversations that are occurring with all these messages going back and forth and across all the people that we're communicating with? How can we start to get this lens and this view of what's actually going on, and how are our students feeling? Keep our finger on the pulse of their emotions and the sentiment and the topics that are important to them over the year. How's that changing? Are they more positive about financial aid now after FAFSA, and they've gotten answers right after this past spring? Or are there still a lot of open questions? Or let's jump into and explore where there's frustrated conversations about the application process, and now we can really zoom in and figure out what we can do to change things and improve. And we're not having to guess. We can really just jump into exactly what our students telling us and utilize these amazing tools and technology that exist today. And it's almost irresponsible not to, right? Now that we have these tools at our fingertips to explore this data, take what was really unstructured and messy and be able to just refine it into this very structured, consistent viewpoint. So I'm really excited about everything that conversation intelligence now allows institutions to be able to do, kind of transform their focus from just trying to make sure they have enough messages going on to making sure they're having the right kind of conversations with students and spending their time effectively. And I'm just going to take a look through. I see we have a few questions, so thank you, everyone. As you still have more questions, please submit them in. One of the very first questions that we had gotten was about so the AI, and we'll refer to them AI assistants. So that would be kind of the AI that's participating in the conversations directly, right? And so let's say you have your chat bot and you want the AI might be responding to questions. So it's really important for us to be the higher ed partner, as Josie said at the beginning, to ensure that our customers within higher ed are compliant, especially within the context of higher ed. And obviously bring that kind of that specialty point of view. And so within AI, they all have to self-identify that it's an AI, so that when the student is communicating with that AI bot, they know that that's who they're speaking with. And so obviously it's transparent. The humans, the staff at the organization can always see those conversations that are going on. But most of the time, if that conversation is not going well, the student's going to say, hey, I just want to talk to a human, right? I want to press like 0, right? Effectively on the phone tree for those of us who are, actually call into places. That's what they're going to jump to. Say, hey, maybe I'm not going to answer, or maybe I know I have a specific, case or question that I know you're not going to be able to help me with. Let me just jump and talk to a human right away. So because of that self-identification built on our compliance systems, students often will just go right and talk to the human directly, but a human can obviously always intervene at any point in time. Let's see, using, okay, so there's another question about, I think related as well to this, where you have an AI assistant. And I think this is probably where most folks are familiar with seeing AI chat, right? It kind of have maybe this bot or AI agents is what, is a lot of the nomenclature kind of buzzing around today. Again, ours are called AI assistants. And that would be, hey, within the chat, could they have like an avatar, right? Like the mascot of a school. And that is generally, the most common thing we see within our chat is they brand the kind of the AI, bot as the mascot or something along those lines to give it some sort of persona. But it's really nice because you can obviously craft it to have a certain personality, and depending on the kind of team or the context that it's in, you can tweak, the kinds of responses that it gives, and the boundaries of even the information that it would respond to. But again, that would be separate from the AI that evaluates what are conversations and what the sentiments of those conversations are, because obviously humans that are having conversations also can have ones that are either really positive and really, resolve things really well, or the opposite sometimes, unfortunately. So detecting that regardless of the person or AI having the conversation is important. So we have kind of those two sides of AI here.
Yeah, I think the thing I'll add into that, because I think it might have been part of the question, is using a mascot specifically for like text messaging. And I think that there is a time and a place for that. But, some of the best practices to think about is make sure then the mascot has a dedicated phone number, like a text number. Because what will happen is students might reply to it at some point, and you don't want them to get confused with, when they would reply to, the mascot versus maybe their enrollment counselor or whatever it might be. And so, really what you want to be doing is thinking through the strategy of what you're trying to achieve. What's the audience for these messages? What is the nature of what I'm trying to communicate? Am I trying to engage students in a conversation here? Or am I just using this for fun sort of broadcast messages? So, kind of think through that and then you can set it up.
I know we are almost out of time. And then the next two questions we have are actually really related to kind of like preferences and even some like psychology, which I love. I love that that's where folks' minds are going, because that's really what we're focused on really understanding conversations. And so the one was talking about the preferences of Gen Z on digital versus traditional models. Curious, does the data support older students or faculty embrace it readily as well? Which is a great point. And so, hey, what would it look like for these other generations that we're communicating with? Your returning students or maybe your faculty, et cetera. I would say the one advantage with text is that it is still ubiquitous, right? It has been around a long time. People are using it. How they utilize it, or maybe their dependence on it versus other channels, is definitely different. But just the low friction of it is, it just makes it universal. So if, very few people say, no, I don't want to text about that. I'd rather send you a long email, right? Most people say, no, I've got a quick question. I'd rather handle that. But it would be great to publish some data about that, because we definitely have some more information there. And then the last question is about neuroscience of someone's attention and absorption when they know they're talking to a bot and not a human, which is really interesting. We have a lot of folks that when they go to roll out the kind of the AI assistant on the website, so, well, how are people going to respond to this? They're going to want to talk to it. They're going to trust it, et cetera. But ultimately what they found with the data, the science supports, and what they found is they're talking to a bot. There's like reduced social presence and emotional engagement. And as Josie spoke earlier, especially with Gen Z, expressing emotions digitally is something they're a lot more comfortable with. And when they're speaking with a bot, there's a lot less pressure to have to say it the right way. And if I, especially on the enrollment side, and I feel this pressure of getting into the institution, not saying the wrong thing, it sometimes reduces that risk of them asking the question that they really want to ask, but they don't know the right way to word it. Or when they're talking with the bot, that risk goes down. And they can ask the question they really need to. All right.
Right. Well, I think we've come to the end here, and I think the webinar will close off in less than a minute. So I would just like to thank all of you for attending, for your engagement, for your great questions and conversations in the chat. And you will be receiving a copy of this tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are.
Take care, everyone.